Vishwamitra now has what he came for. He arrived in Ayodhya because he wanted to take Ram with him back to his ashram in the forest. Even though Dashrath Maharaj initially resisted, he is then persuaded by the Guru, Vasishtha ji, and he agrees that Rama can accompany Vishwamitra. So the three of them set off, Vishwamitra, Ram, and Lakshman. And as they're journeying through the forest, of course, they're seeing lots of different things. They're seeing different ashrams. They're seeing different landscapes. And it's really beautifully described how Ram is filled with a curiosity about everything he sees. And so he takes every opportunity to ask Vishwamitra about what it is they're seeing, whose ashram is this, who's lived here in the past, and what's the history of all these different places. And Vishwamitra, of course, obliges, and he describes all these different things to Ram as they're walking. Now, the purpose for which they've gone to the forest is Vishwamitra, his ashram, and his practice of rituals is being threatened by these asuras or demons who are doing very unpleasant things every time he starts a ritual. And the description is quite graphic. So he'll start a ritual and these demons will come and they'll start sort of showering blood and all sorts of unpleasant things all over the area wherever he's doing this. And of course, that being the case, he has to stop. His life is also threatened by them. So he needs some protection. The main demon or female demon who is threatening Vishwamitra is someone by the name of Tarika. And Tarika's story is actually interesting. She was born not as a demon, she was born as a sort of celestial being. And her father got her married to a demon who was killed by the curse of a rishi. And as a result of that, she herself was then cursed. So she has this whole backstory. But she is the main one who they're there to kind of to kill and to defeat. And so as they're walking through the forest, this is described very quickly in the Tulsi Ramayana. So Tulsi Das ji has this whole episode happen in a matter of like a couple of lines. She appears, Ram shoots an arrow, and she's killed. It's very simple. They then arrive at Vishwamitra's ashram. And Tarika having been defeated, Vishwamitra then says that, okay, now we've arrived back in the ashram. Now we still have these two other demons to defeat. So he starts his ritual, which is sort of like the announcement for all the demons to congregate and, just obstruct whatever is going on. So he starts his ritual. And of course, these two appear. So these two are called Marich and Subahu. And they are the sons of Tarika. So they appear. And what Ram does is very interesting. They're both treated differently. So Ram shoots Marich with an arrow that is blunt. And as a result of that, he's not killed, but he is thrown a distance of what is described as about 800 miles. So basically, he's thrown across the country. Subahu is not shown as much mercy. For him, Ram shoots an arrow and he dies. And the rest of the demons are taken care of by Lakshman. So now they've accomplished whatever work Vishwamitra has brought them there for. So he's very happy. And what he blesses them with is something which I think is something all of us would want. He blesses them with 2 mantras. And these 2 mantras are mantras to help deal with hunger and thirst. So basically, when you have these, if you chant them and if you know how to use them, you don't feel hungry and you don't feel thirsty. Unfortunately for us, that knowledge is no longer available, and therefore we have to deal with our hunger and thirst in the normal way. But Ram and Lakshman didn't. So they get these 2 mantras. They also get a whole host of weapons or astras that are given to them by Vishwamitra and really given to Ram. So now Vishwamitra, there's a really long list. If you're interested, it's in the Valmiki Ramayana. There's a long list, and each weapon has its own name. Vishwamitra blesses Ram with all these weapons, and they all sort of appear before Ram. And they're described as sentient. So they all come to him, and he says, I don't need you right now, so you can, you don't need to stay with me, but when I need you, I'll call you. And that's sort of the end of that episode. But a request is then made by Ram. And his request is that, Vishwamitra, you have given me all these weapons, and you've taught me how to use them. But I also need to know how to withdraw and recall those weapons. So Vishwamitra doesn't volunteer this information, but Ram asks for it. He asks, teach me how to call them back. And so Vishwamitra does, of course. But this is really beautiful, and, it's kind of a minor point in the story, but really striking in that you find Ram really kind of thinking ahead and thinking not just in terms of, he's a teenager at this point, right? So he is receiving all these weapons and not thinking like a young boy, not thinking and, sort of getting excited about having the opportunity to use all these new powers that he's been bestowed with, but really thinking about being responsible with the power that he's been given. And so Vishwamitra gives him that, and they conclude their stay in that ashram. Now, once the work is done, once these demons have been defeated, Vishwamitra then doesn't see any reason to continue performing his rituals, right? Because it's explained that the reason to perform all these rituals, the end result is supposed to be that you attain God. Vishwamitra has realized that Ram is an avatar, right? As we've discussed, Ram is an incarnation. So if you have God with you, then what's the point of performing the rituals, right? If you've attained the goal, you don't need to hold on to the means that has helped you reach there. But again, Ram says to him that the purpose for performing those rituals is also to uphold Dharma, to uphold righteousness. In other words, when you perform that ritual, you are contributing to the well-being of everyone around you. It's not just for you and your personal gain. It is for the benefit of the community, the environment. And therefore, you should continue performing your dharma so that everyone can benefit. And so in this way, he also teaches Vishwamitra about dharma and about performing dharma selflessly, not just for one's own benefit. So now this is the story part. And there is deep symbolism behind the defeat of these demons that are described. The first is Tadka. Tadka represents the false expectations that arise in our mind as a result of ignorance. When we don't understand a situation or a person or an object correctly, we generally tend to hold false or unrealistic expectations about, that person or that thing or that situation. And when we have false expectations, then two things are born. So she has two sons, right? The first is sorrow or disappointment, pain, suffering, right? When we have false expectations, then we will naturally experience disappointment when we transact with the world. It's something as simple as expecting chili to be sweet. When you eat that chili, your expectation is that it's sweet. That expectation is false. You'll be disappointed, right? And if you have a sweet tooth and you eat loads of chilies, you will be in pain physically. So the result of false expectation is sorrow. And the other thing that happens, the other thing that is born is negativities or faults. When we have false expectations, then unless we are very careful about analyzing and handling those expectations, when they are disappointed, we will have a tendency to throw the blame on everyone else and everything else, rather than looking to see what we can correct within our own thinking. So now here, Ram treats these three differently, right? Tarika, as soon as she appears, she's killed. And that is to indicate that when we have these false expectations, when we have this sort of these wrong patterns of thought, if we give them room to grow and to be sustained, we are setting ourselves up for disappointment. And therefore, the idea is that as soon as we spot a faulty pattern of thought or behavior, we don't give it any room and we immediately correct it, right? The correction here, because it's a story and it's symbolic, is in the form of death. But really what that means is the end of a wrong thought pattern so that the right one can be instilled. Once that wrong thought pattern is removed, then its consequence, sorrow, will also immediately go. But for the third one, right, for Marich, those negativities which appear in our personality or our mind, Rama gives him room, right? So instead of being killed, he's thrown 800 miles away. The idea being there that, of course, for those who know the story, Marich plays a very pivotal part later on. So he has to be kept alive for that sake. But in terms of the spiritual significance here, the idea is that negativities can be corrected. When we see these thoughts arising in our mind, there is room for us to correct these thoughts, right? There is room for us to correct the tendency to throw blame, for example. And therefore, we should look for opportunities, and we can look for opportunities to make those corrections. So the question for us is really here around this idea of false expectations. What expectations do you hold about the world and the people around you? Are those expectations realistic, or do they not match up with the nature of the world and the nature of those people who are around you? Can false expectations serve us in any way? Or are they to be negated as soon as we become aware of them? Something to think about. Hari Om.
Thank you for listening to this episode of Living Ramayana. To stay updated on Chinmaya Mission UK's activities, visit our website chinmayauk.org and follow us on social media. Subscribe to this podcast and join us for the next episode. Hari Om.